Yeah, my name is Raj Rajan. I'm the technical lead for sustainability at Ecolab, which is a global multinational business that is focused on business to business services.
Okay. Um, so just reflecting now that you're at a point where final interview of the conference, you have had time to reflect a little bit on what has been discussed. Um, what in general are some of the top lessons you've learned in the past year regarding climate adaptation and solutions for the future?
Yeah, interestingly, one thing that it's almost like a full circle coming back home, hearing Ken Hirsch talk about adaptation. And if I may, I want to step back and talk about adaptation in the broader context, the way Ken framed it. So here's the framework, right? We have about 4 billion people, additional people that we're going to add to this planet. And about 2 billion of them are going to be upwardly mobile, moving from the poorer classes of society into the middle class. And a significant portion of these people are going to move from rural areas into urban areas. So these are three mega trends and dynamics that we have had to adapt to, irrespective of climate change and all the complications that come with it. So as a company, as Ecolab, for example, if you deconstruct this framework and look at the issues that really matter, the dimensions, you're looking at clean water, safe food, reliable energy, and healthy environments. These are all dimensions that have been important to our products and services, important outcomes of our offerings to customers, and are also offerings and outcomes that are affected by these mega trends of population growth, urban migration, and upward mobility. So to hear this in the context and then overlaying the climate change context on top of it and add one more layer that increases the sense of urgency with respect to adaptation gives us a pause to think that we actually have a lot more social value to add, not from a philanthropic or social responsibility layer added to our core business, but from our core business, period. You know, if we are in the business of making the world cleaner, safer, and healthier, we are helping with adaptation in the context of all these mega trends. That was my big takeaway from this meeting today.
So,
just one thing, he keeps looking at the camera. I don't know if you wanted to look at the camera or just to look at you.
Yeah, otherwise I keep going back and forth.
right. Yeah, maybe just look here, just for consistency's
Right.
sake.
Just look at her. The camera.
Okay.
I should have mentioned that before.
Got it. Yeah. Do you want to redo this?
It's
You
up to
can
her.
filter some of those points in future commentary, rather than, unless you want to give that same pitch again, but we can continue the conversation as
Okay.
you want to drop those points in.
Okay.
So at this conference, we've talked a lot about big data. How can you use indices such as ND-GAIN to make sustainable adjustments in your businesses, such as at Ecolab?
Yeah, it was fascinating to hear the panel that discussed big data, and the fact that someone from computer science is actually involved as the lead in developing the index further at ND is very critical, because as you to make the information that comes in GAIN more actionable, we've always talked about that we need to get more granular from a geography perspective. It needs to get to more of a regional and local level. In particular, it has to focus on urban environments, because that's where a lot of the upliftment in quality of life is going to come from. That's where a lot of the population shift is going to happen. And if you think about it, in emerging markets, like anywhere in the Asia Pacific, you look at China, you look at India, you look at Brazil, Latin America, a lot of the population growth and the income dynamics are really going to come in the urban sectors. And there is a lot of data that needs to go into it, because if you think about it, there was another panel that talked about supply chain. Supply chain, the urban environment has an even bigger supply chain than any major multinational corporation can imagine. Practically everything that flows into a city, whether it is food, clothing, energy, electric power, water, it all comes outside the boundary of the city. So you cannot green a city by just pushing all the brown activities outside. The supply chain is still extremely relevant, and in the context of climate change, it's even more relevant, because extreme weather patterns can dramatically disrupt the flow of these materials into those cities. So big data is very critical, and even more important than just the raw data itself and the number of data points that you'll need as you get granular and get into the urban environment. The importance is in connecting the interactions between these data sets. So whether you're looking at water, whether you're looking at energy, you're looking at food, what is the interaction? You know, we hear this term thrown around a lot, food-water nexus or energy-water nexus or water-food-energy nexus. Nowhere is that more relevant than in an urban environment. So you not only have to look at the dimensions of how are different urban environments or regions or national level governments doing in the context of these individual dimensions, which GAIN is already doing. You'll have to look at synergistic and antagonistic relationships between these. Is something being done for greenhouse gas mitigation that's going to affect the readiness in the context of food? It's something being done in the context of water and food that's potentially going to affect infection prevention and public health. And those kinds of interactions is going to make it even bigger data. And that is a big thing. So it's very important that the people who are used to converting data into information, that's where the challenge is, right? And the bigger the data, bigger the challenge. And I think since GAIN is about actionable information, the index is going to have a significant challenge in the big data space, and it's wonderful that they have the computer scientists involved.
So speaking on big data and the numbers and transitioning that to information, how can you talk about concrete examples of where the people come in, the qualitative and the stakeholders?
Yeah, and the individual, it's going to vary by region, and you've heard examples. You know, we've heard examples of the impact that climate change is having in the Philippines, for example. We heard a lot about the hurricane example, and we heard about areas like Central Africa. There are several countries in the GAIN index are ranking really low, and they're trending in the wrong direction, and it's primarily driven by destability in that region. And you had some fantastic examples of how the forest fires caused by climate change in Russia affected grain prices in Egypt and contributed in part to the Arab Spring. And the other example, that the drought in Syria actually led to huge migration of populations from rural areas into urban areas in Syria, which led to destabilization and discontent that ultimately has led to the conflict that we see, domestic conflict in Syria. So the people dimension is never lost in this whole issue. There's always a chicken and egg thing. Someone will say, is destabilization adding to the problems already caused by climate change? Or is the destabilization actually being caused by climate change? But it's going to be a constant interaction between, and I think one of the Notre Dame professors mentioned it, interaction between the physical scientists and the social scientists to figure out what is the cost and what is the effect and what is the relationship, so that we can personalize and get into the human component of this information.
And shifting our focus just a bit, could you talk a bit about Ecolab's sustainability initiatives? If you are doing any work in investing in developing regions, or just what you're really doing to make your business more sustainable, especially for your clients?
Sure. Ecolab as a company, it's not our sustainability initiative, but our core business initiative is completely aligned with all aspects of tackling readiness and resilience in the communities we operate in. We have business in 171 countries. I think that just leaves a handful of countries that we are not providing products and services in. And we have 45,000 employees, of which over half, actually 26,000 of them, are feet on the street, who are dealing with the daily issues that people in these 171 countries deal with every day. Our products and services, whether it's not the sustainability dimension, which I'll talk about in a minute, but our core products and services have to do with industrial hygiene, public health infection prevention, healthcare, energy production, power generation, and the ability for all industrial and commercial sectors to do more with less, to increase their productivity in terms of utilizing the assets, protecting the assets, and using less resources, like less time, less labor, less energy, and less water. And since these become often critical components, most of our growth is going to come from Asia Pacific and Latin America in the future. And we expect a lot of the business growth to come from those regions where there is the most limitations in terms of resource availability. and where the population growth is going to make that resource limitation even stronger. So from that perspective, we are very much focused on delivering offerings, and that's where this added sustainability piece comes in. Since we put water to work, since we put energy to work, our customers will not be sustainable in their operations unless we can reduce their dependence on water and energy. So we want them to deliver more, produce more of their products, deliver more of their services while using less energy and less water. And all our product development, I'm actually housed within the R&D program at Ecolab as the sustainability technical lead. And all our focus is on reducing water use, reducing energy use, while never compromising the key outcomes, whether it's cleaning, sanitation, power generation, or energy production.
Lost my train of thought. You had me so engaged. Final question. Being a corporate sustainability officer and knowing how the corporate climate adaptation, climate mitigation space is evolving, what are you seeing in terms of companies who are getting more involved in the space? What's going on in corporate social responsibility as a whole from a positive perspective?
That's a great question. If you look at what has happened, particularly in the last couple of years, one of the most dramatic things that has happened is how companies are actually valuing externalities. Our CEO has a very interesting thing to say. He says, for executives in a corporation, once you put a dollar sign in front of something, we know exactly how to deal with the situation. It's only when the dollar sign is missing, numbers are abstract to executives if they don't have dollar signs in front of them. And it's a very general statement, but if you look at it, what he's essentially saying is, some of these issues like natural capital accounting, valuing ecosystem services, putting the true value, incorporating the social cost, whether it's a social cost of carbon, or putting the true value on water as opposed to what your utility bills are, those are all activities that will enhance business around water conservation, energy conservation, and preserving, and conservation in general, natural resources. But it won't happen if we look at current market price. So companies need to not just understand and digest the true value of these things, they need to actually have an internal phantom pricing system to actually use it in their accounting. So whether you call it triple bottom line accounting or true value accounting, and it was used to be in the last 10 years, it's early adopters have done it, but it was primarily in the consumer product space. So there was some skepticism that the companies that are doing this more as window dressing for green branding, but now you're starting to see it in the B2B space. Companies that don't have any visibility on the storefront or the shelf in the retail store are actually paying a lot of attention to true value accounting and accounting for the social costs of not just the natural infrastructure but also the resources, and that is the big change that's going to do a lot more than any government regulation ever can achieve within the same time frame.
Any final comments you'd like to make that I've missed?
No, I think primarily I think where GAIN is headed in terms of more granularity and a stronger focus on the impact dimension and the human aspect, as opposed to looking at it more at a national level as a rolled up metric. The key message that it's not that the devil is in the details, the goodness is in the details, you know. So that's a wrong term to use, I guess, but it is really all the good value in GAIN is not in that one index per country, but in the details as you drill down into it. And clearly there's a lot of focus going forward into looking at what builds up into that index and showcasing the components that add up to it as opposed to just the final number, and I think that's a great approach to take.